three. And one who's hanging out with.
Hi, Mary.
Good afternoon, Robert.
You only have me on audio because I'm working on two different systems right now, and this
All
system
right.
doesn't have a camera. But I could provide the same level of assistance you had before, where I control the PowerPoint.
I think that would be helpful, and then Ellen can, see who's coming.
Correct. Yep. No, not a problem.
Hi, Sanaz.
Good afternoon. FYI, you're recording.
Oh, let's pause that. Oh, Mary, you have to do that.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mary Reese from NJPSA and FEA, and I serve as the project director for this exciting initiative. We're gratified and thrilled that you have decided to join us this afternoon to learn more about this pilot project that will address adverse childhood experiences and trauma through a healing-centered engagement model. For today's session, we ask that you keep off your video and your audio features. We will enable the chat during the question and answer period at the end so that you may post your thoughts and questions. So in order to provide context for this project, I'll share the journey that has occurred prior to today's announcement. Shortly after the advent of COVID-19, NJPSA and FEA was approached by the Burke Foundation with a request to develop a blueprint to address ACEs and trauma in school settings. The foundation has a successful track record with similar projects that serve infants and their families, and they wanted to explore this critical and timely topic in pre-K-12 schools. Shortly thereafter, the Geraldine R. Dodge Foundation joined the conversation and provided the initial funding for the development work. We gathered experts in the education and mental health fields to design the blueprint. But what happened was we evolved into creating a model that is based on healing-centered engagement, a phrase coined by Dr. Sean Ginwright to address ACEs and trauma. This blueprint was the product of recommendations from a large steering committee of diverse thought leaders from education, mental health, community advocates, along with several focus groups of educators, families, and students, as well as our development team. Another major related event that just occurred today at noon was the governor's announcement of the release of the New Jersey ACEs statewide action plan. Governor Murphy was joined by Lieutenant Governor Sheila Oliver, the First Lady Tammy Murphy, New Jersey DCF Commissioner Christine Beyer, and Dave Ellis, who is with us today. The funding for this free pilot project, which we will discuss now, has been a collaborative effort of private and community foundations, along with a statewide group who will be acknowledged shortly. We hope that you will join us on this amazing journey so that we'll be able to mitigate the experiences of ACEs and trauma on adults and children, those whom we serve, all through a lens of healing. And at this time, I would like to present Pat Wright, the Executive Director of NJPSA, and Donna McInerney, who is the CEO of the Foundation for Educational Administration.
Thank you, Mary, and good afternoon, friends. Thanks to everyone for joining us today. I bring greetings from Pat Wright, our Executive Director at NJPSA, and I want to offer our gratitude to the funders of this project, the Burke Foundation, the Geraldine R. Dodge Foundation, the Princeton Area Community Foundation, and the New Jersey Pandemic Relief Fund, along with the New Jersey Health Initiatives. Mary mentioned earlier that this has been a journey, and it's been an extraordinary journey with remarkable collaboration and teamwork from so many different groups. And I want to take a few minutes to thank those who contributed to the training model, our development team and their commitment, the thought leaders on our steering committee, the primary presenters, project consultants, trainers, and coaches. I'd like to thank from NJEA, Steve Beatty and Amanda Adams, as well as the ACE interface master trainers, Dave Ellis, Executive Director for the Office of Resilience, and Ruth Kaluski from the Mental Health Association of New Jersey. Without each of these groups and individuals making this kind of commitment, this work could never have reached the point at which it is. And we're very excited about working with the schools from the pilot to focus on this important work. Right now, I'd like to invite Ann Ritter from the Burke Foundation to share a few words with us.
Great. Well, thank you, Donna. Hi, everyone. My name is Ann Ritter, and I'm a program officer at the Burke Foundation. We are a grant-making foundation based in Princeton, and we focus on supporting healthy child development throughout New Jersey. We're a founding member of the New Jersey ACEs Collaborative, which is a public-private partnership that seeks to increase public awareness of adverse childhood experiences and address the long-term impact that they could have on children, families, and communities. Along with our partners, we work to activate people across the state to help people in New Jersey prevent, protect against, and heal from ACEs. And this new pilot program that you're here to hear about today, which we are so excited about, is designed to provide educators and school staff with the knowledge and tools to support children who have experienced adversity and trauma. We have all faced traumatic experiences that we never thought that we would face over the past year, and we know that educators have been under tremendous stress. But what we know and what research shows is that supportive relationships can serve as a protective buffer, and they can really help children foster their own resilience and thrive. And our hope is that these pilot offerings that you'll hear about today will help you as educators thrive as well. So thanks so much to our partners in this work, who you will hear from today, and thanks as well to our other New Jersey-based funders listed here on the slide who have made this all possible. And most importantly, thank you all for taking the time to join us today and hear a little bit more about this great project. And now I will hand it off to Steve Beatty of NJEA.
Thank you, and thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to be here today. My name is Steve Beatty. I am a high school social studies teacher in Bridgewater Raritan High School in Somerset County. Secretary Treasurer now of the NJEA, and it's my pleasure to be here with everyone here as well, looking around and seeing some of people, warriors in the work, people that have gotten to know in doing this, both staff, educators, and one of my fellow Bridgewater Raritan High School teachers as well on here. Hi, Denise. So it's good to see you all out here because this work is that important. Education associations, our communities are inexorably tied together in this and all the work that we do. We talk about healing-centered engagement. It's what we do on a normal day in a school, right? We work with our kids, we work with our parents, we work with our communities because we know it's about everyone having a vital role in children's education. And that means we have to link arms and hearts in the work to really understand what's at stake and invest ourselves. And that's why I'm very pleased, I'm humbled, I'm proud that a few years back I was tasked along with my partner, Amanda Adams at NJEA, in chairing our task force and bringing together various practitioners from around the state and engaging them with our members through our various programs that are available to all of our members and locals, because again, we know it will take all of us. That there are so many practitioners out there doing this work. We want to make sure that we can help and do all that we can with our resources to put everyone together. And of course, having school districts in every nook and cranny of the state makes that work easier to facilitate. And so being part of this pilot and working with so many of these great groups, the funders and all the people at PSA and all the other associations, it's been a very an incredible journey because again, we know that we have the same goals in the work that we are doing. And there is no alternative to success, right? Failure means we're failing our students, we're failing our communities, and we're taking away the opportunity that every kid has as they grow up to live to their full potential. So again, I'm thankful that all of you are here to be part of this, and NJEA as well. On behalf of myself, Marie Bliston, and Sean Spiller, thank you for your time and all the efforts now and going forward. So thank you.
Well, thank you, and thank Donna for your leadership and good support of this initiative. Anne has been our muse, our sage, our cheerleader, our thought partner. And Steve with NJEA. NJEA has been a partner of NJPSA and FEA in so many different endeavors, and has been a key collaborator on this pilot project from day one. So I thank you all very much for saying hello and greeting people today. Rob? So I'd like to share with you the components of this pilot project. We're talking about 25 schools, 25 public schools. They can be charter schools, Renaissance schools, or other configurations. Each school will select 2 trusted messengers, and we have Rosie Grant from the Patterson Education Fund who contributed that nomenclature to us. These people will serve as our project ambassadors in each school. We also would like the school to designate a team that can serve as a liaison. So one that's already in the school, functioning in the school, a PERT team, school climate team, INRS, etc. Schools will commit to a minimum of 6 hours of training for all faculty and staff. And we're talking about all the adults in the building who touch kids. And we've purposefully chosen to start with adults because we feel we need to provide this training to the adults before we can talk about moving it into the student population. The components will be the ACE interface training, healing-centered engagement, as well as core protective systems. There will be opportunity as well for reflection and for planning action thereafter. Every school will have the services of a trained coach. And we also will have, through the Mental Health Association in New Jersey, youth mental health first aid training for 1 to 2 staff members. And finally, we'll have collaboration with at least 2 family or community organizations. In our work, we realize how critical it is for the community to be actively engaged in this process. So it may be the PTA or PTO, it might be your bilingual advisory committee, it could be your local Y, it could be your education foundation, it could be a mental health organization. That's up to you. They do need to be organizations with whom you have had an ongoing successful relationship. Rob. So to start off this conversation about the actual training pieces of it, I would like to introduce you to Dave Ellis, whom we've mentioned before, the Executive Director of the Office of Resilience at the New Jersey Department of Children and Families. And he was very prominently displayed and with the governor today and the other dignitaries. And we hope that he'll talk to us a little bit about the statewide action plan. And Amanda Adams, who is the Associate Director of Professional Development and the coordinator of the Priority Schools Initiative at NJEA. Dave and Amanda.
Thank you, Mary, and welcome to everyone. It was interesting. I haven't been in a press conference quite like that one before, but we'll talk about that later. So Mary mentioned the ACE interface curriculum, and what I can tell you, and the slide you see in front of you is the very first slide of the presentation that we open with. And the part that I want you to take a very close look with is not only is it about understanding adverse childhood experiences, but in the circle, it talks about what the true mission is, which is to build self-healing communities. And so to that end, this curriculum is laid out in a specific way. It starts looking at the neuroscience and understanding how the brain works. And it's done that way specifically so that we begin to get an understanding of just what the implications can be. But with a self-healing communities curriculum, you're looking at multiple pieces that will all come together under one specific umbrella. So if you go to the next slide, please. I was talking about the neuroscience. This is just one of the many slides out of the presentation that talks about synaptic density. And so as we get into this work, we need folks to understand how brains work so that when they come to the second portion of this training, that they have a fuller understanding of what does it mean when you have ACEs and how does it truly impact the brain, so that you can really talk with people at a level that would help them understand exactly what it is that we're talking about. Next slide. So the second part of this presentation is the ACE study itself. There are many, many slides in this presentation. And what I can tell you is that that very first section around the neuroscience, I'm not a neuroscientist, first of all. I'm not a surgeon, I'm not a doctor of any kind. But I can tell you that all of the slides in the section on the neuroscience have been reviewed by Dr. Martin Teicher at Harvard Medical, and he has approved every one of those slides as being accurate. And so part of the reason that we stick so closely to the information in this and we don't deviate is because we want the fidelity to still be there. So for any of the slides that we have, if you want the citations, we can certainly have those for you. But that is why we use this specific curriculum. There are a lot of slides to this. And so we have the ability to customize the presentation for different audiences. So when we come to education, there are some things that we will present that will look, some of the slides will look different than if you were presenting to social workers or the medical profession. Next slide, please. So the third part of this, and typically by the time you've got done having a conversation about the brain and then the ACE study, the next logical step is to move into that space of resilience. We don't talk much about resilience itself. We do talk about building self-healing communities, and we talk a lot about core protective systems. We talk about those three that you see on the left, the capabilities, individual capabilities. We talk about the attachment and belonging, and we talk about that third one. Because the third one is the one that in most cases don't get talked about. The strengths of the community, culture, and spirituality. And we know that individually, those things are very strong by themselves, but we know that they're even stronger when they're nested together. And so we spend quite a bit of time talking about what are those core protective systems, how do they work together, and how are they best incorporated into the work that you do. Again, we're talking about building self-healing communities. This is a culture shift, and it's about changing complex systems. We're asking people to do their work differently. This presentation, as all ACE presentations, talk about root causes and not the symptoms. And so that's what we're trying to get at here. This presentation is about 45 minutes to an hour long. When we traditionally train it, we train, or I should say when we present it, we present all three modules at once. Mainly because rarely can you get everybody back in the room at the same time. We can do it online, which was one of the questions that we were asked earlier. Yes, we can do this online. There are a couple of things that we do ask people to do, and one of those is to make sure that your cameras are on at all times. And that is our way of being able to connect with the audience, because sometimes things happen. And with this being the type of subject that it is, we want the ability to see if people are being impacted by what we're saying, if we need to work on things, when do we need to move or not. So I'm just trying to preemptively answer some of the questions that I remember from this morning, and they're not all flowing into my head. I'm sorry, I still have, believe it or not, 2 more interviews I have to do before my day is over. Mary asked me to talk a little bit about the statewide plan, so I'm going to quickly do that, Amanda, and then I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about the NJEA part. So at noon today, Governor Murphy, Lieutenant Governor Oliver, First Lady Tammy Murphy, Commissioner Byer, and I released the statewide action plan to address adverse childhood experiences in New Jersey. It is a blueprint for how we wish to move forward. And it is designed, if you remember that self-healing communities piece at the beginning, that slide, it is designed around the self-healing communities model. If you want to know more about that specific model, you can go out to the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation site, and you'll type in self-healing communities, and you'll find a rather large one out there, article out there. It is a public health model, and it is a model that is used across the country for communities that have been successful at doing this work. So the plan has 5 goals in it, 5 goal areas. And the real piece of this for me is that it truly was designed by people in the community. They're the ones who told us what we should be doing. When you open it and start to look through, you'll find their words, not ours. Their words are the ones that are driving what's in that plan. It's a living plan, meaning that every year we're going to check back with community to find out, did we accomplish what we said? What else do we need to be doing? Did we not do what we said? And we'll live with whatever that input is. But by design, it is set up for those who are most directly impacted to lead. And so I see Amanda just put the link to the statewide ACEs connection page. You'll find a plan there. We ask that you look at it, that there's a little survey that says, how do you want to be involved? Everyone keeps asking me, well, what do you want us to do? And my statement is, you know your work better than anyone else. Tell us how you want to be in this work, and let's figure it out together. If all we do is give each other answers, we're never really responsible for making sure that things change and move forward. And that's what this curricula is designed around. So Amanda, I'm going to give this over to you. Mary, I will be bowing off a little bit early today. Like I say, I've got more things that I have to catch up with before my day is done, but thank you very much.
Thank you, Dave. It's a grand day for you today. Amanda?
Thanks, Dave, and congratulations on this day of finally breaking this action plan. And thank you, Mary. So as Dave said, Rob, if you can go to the next slide. As Dave said, the NJEA, and Mary said, NJEA has trained over, I said 30 last time, so we're like closer to 50 people who've been trained on the ACE as presenters for the ACE interface curriculum. And a core team of them have become really skilled at it. So we're going to have a core team of NJEA consultants who will be presenting the ACE interface curriculum as a training, an interactive training with opportunities to have discussion kind of in between. It is it's 2 parts. It's a 3-part training that will be done in 2 days. And the reason why is, as Dave said, the first part around the neuroscience, the ACE study, and the core protective systems are all done in the same day, so that the entire group of staff who will be trained hear it together and can be in conversation together. After I'm finished, you're going to hear about a healing centered training and some mental health training. Once all of the training is done, we will engage in an action planning session that is rooted in the research that you all learned as a staff, will learn as a staff, and it will gauge the wisdom in the room, meaning that there are many people on this call and in the buildings of which you work who have ideas around what works for your students and the community. And we will tap into that and also be prepared to offer resources to help you with your action plans moving forward. The ACE interface curriculum was designed to train adults. It was also designed to train people from the community, parents and community leaders. And so that's who we will be focusing on during this pilot. And then through as you all learn through this together, and develop your action plan, what comes of that and how you want to roll it out into your students and into deeper into your community and across your district will be a result of what you've learned and what the training that the trusted messengers and coaches that Mary mentioned earlier will support. I just wanted to say, like Dave, some questions that kind of came up last time that I'd like to address in advance is kind of what happens after the training. So the point of this is to build capacity within the school. It is a pilot, right? So this is an opportunity for all of us to learn around becoming a self-healing community or a healing-centered school community. And then the hope is that you will learn enough and you will collaborate enough to be able to share this information throughout your schools, deeper into the community, throughout your school districts and perhaps across the counties. I'm just trying to think. There was something on the tip of my tongue. So I'm sure more questions will come up later that we'll get a chance to address. So thank you, Mary, for this opportunity to speak today.
Thanks very much, Amanda, and thanks, Dave, too. Really is an exciting day for this work. So as I said, healing-centered engagement model is the framework and the mindset that we wish to promote during this pilot. And we have two of our development team members with us today to talk about that. So we have Sanaz Hojra, who is an independent consultant, and Caitlin Mulcahy, who's the Associate Director of the Center for Autism and Early Childhood Mental Health at Montclair State University. Sanaz?
Thank you, Mary. Trauma-informed care essentially refers to a broad set of principles that are guided and directed of how we view the impact of severe harm on a person's mental, physical, and emotional health. And trauma-informed care encourages us to support treatment to the whole person rather than focusing on only treating individual symptoms or specific behaviors. Go to the next slide, please. And so trauma-informed care really took us from this idea of if someone is exhibiting a strange behavior, violent behavior, or extreme behavior, what's wrong with you? And that change took us from that thought all the way to what happened to you. So we're no longer looking at the behavior, we're trying to understand what's beneath it. And that was a mindset shift. And now Dr. Sean Ginwright, as Mary alluded to, who is the Associate Professor of Education and African American Studies at San Francisco State University, in 2018, he asked us to look a bit further to what's right with you. This is a further mindset shift and builds on trauma-informed care. That ultimately, people who've experienced trauma, it's more than what's happened to them. We are not our traumas. If we could go to the next slide, please. And now, while the term trauma-informed care is incomplete, and it sometimes trauma-informed care presumes that trauma is an individual experience rather than a collective one, and that it provides very little insight as to how we might address the root causes of traumas in neighborhoods, in families, in schools. And ultimately, it can pathologize rather than foster possibly the well-being of an individual. And so Dr. Ginwright asks us to extend that concept of trauma-informed care to focus on strengths, onto possibilities, onto assets, and positions the experience of trauma as a collective or structural experience rather than an individual. We do not live in vacuums or bubbles. We go to the next slide, please. Healing-centered engagement also asks us to position the experience of culture, context, and community, and asks us to shift our ways of knowing, doing, and being in practice. And now my colleague Caitlin will talk furthermore about the tenets of healing-centered engagement.
Thanks, Naz. Next slide, please. So there are a few pillars or tenets to healing-centered engagement that are important to learn about as you consider and discern this application. Because as Naz had said, and certainly Dave and Amanda brought to us, trauma-informed care has been in the zeitgeist, in the literature for a long time. Our original study, for example, on ACEs was put out in 1997 with science and research done in 1995. So we might consider that old at this point. And so our work now has moved, and the work in the field has moved to getting to this place around healing-centered engagement, which is really asking us to extend and expand an idea of thinking of trauma as existing within an individual to actually looking at structures and systems that can uphold and perpetuate trauma. So therefore, we say it's explicitly political. And political not meaning political parties, but instead thinking about policies, governance, discipline, strategies, structure. So as you consider this application, it's important to be thinking about the work that you might be doing in your school as potentially shaking up a lot of those kinds of structures that might be there. So even thinking more about the people who would be participating, not just as mental health staff, but actually people who would have responsibility and influence over those structures in your school. Because again, thinking about trauma just as an individual is what we might consider, again, older science, something that we started with. And now we've grown to understanding actually that we need to address particularly systems and societies that can perpetuate trauma, including systemic racism and structural oppression. So we have healing-centered engagement as this political force that we're looking to work with. Next slide, please. We also know that with trauma experiences, sometimes our concept of self or our feelings of identity have been altered or lost. And so healing-centered engagement works to restore this identity. And so what we see then is that we have all of our work focused on culture and community, really trying to source not just what culture and climate we're creating in our schools, but also to make sure that we uplift and uphold the cultures that exist within our systems and our programs and our schools, so that we can restore that identity that often trauma takes away. Next slide, please. Healing-centered engagement focuses on the well-being we want, and the end of that sentence is not all the problems that we start to see when we think about trauma. Sometimes when we learn about trauma, we get stuck in trauma and all we talk about is trauma. And healing-centered engagement actually says to us, well, that's good. You need to have the awareness of why something is happening and what happened to that person or that child or that student or that adult who's showing you their need. But then what? For what reason are we raising our awareness? We're raising our awareness so that we can move towards strength. We can move towards next. We can move towards possibility. And so our focus as we think about healing-centered engagement is that well-being that we're trying to move folks to, our students to, not only just the trauma that occurred for them. Next slide, please. And as you've been hearing, research bears out that the way that we protect, prevent, and ameliorate trauma is through supportive, consistent relationships with safe adults. And so healing-centered engagement focuses on supporting adults, and the adults specifically who are in healing-centered positions and have healing-centered responsibility to children in their lives. And just again, when we say that, we're not just talking about the mental health folks, we're talking about the entire school building. And so as you'll hear, and I know Amanda and Dave had said earlier, this work, this project is focused on the adults who care for children. There might be a plan that you might create that's about what you'll do with your students, but what you'll engage in this project is focused on those adults who are in those supportive relationships with children. Next slide, please. So as we've been saying, the healing-centered focus is not just on that individual who has experienced trauma, but also that interpersonal relationship that we know is so healing and restorative, and those institutional factors that may need altering, certainly investigation, potentially change in order to uphold a healing-centered focus. So again, not thinking about trauma as a clinical, individual experience, but instead as a collective, systemic, and institutional experience that might need to be then shaped and changed through institutional action. Next slide, please. So lastly, we're focused in healing-centered work on these 4 aspects of culture, meaning, civic action, and again, collective healing through relationships. That one keeps coming up, right? It's one of the most important ones. So the work here that we'll be asking our pilot schools to do is to look at their culture, look at the school climate, so that when someone walks in your program or your building, they have a feeling of what it's like to be there. And that feeling is shared among everyone in the building. And also a way that we're making meaning out of what's happening to us. Is it something that we understand as, again, oh, you've experienced trauma, that means that's all that you have and all that you are, or can we move to possibility? And one way we do that is through civic action. What sorts of ways that we can be responsible to things above our own selves can we cultivate in a school community? And then just again, in case it hasn't been said enough, that piece around collective healing through relationships is what we find in a healing-centered model. All right, thanks, Mary.
Thanks very much, Caitlin and Sanaz. So we also have added another component to this training, and it's youth mental health first aid, which I know some of you may already be using in your schools. We're very happy that the Mental Health Association in New Jersey decided to join this pilot project. And today we have Ruth Kaluski here, who's the Director of Career Connection Employment Resource Institute. She'll talk more about this training opportunity. Ruth?
Yeah, thank you so much, Mary, for having us. And the Mental Health Association in New Jersey is just beyond pleased that we're going to be part of this in our way of offering youth mental health first aid to the pilot schools. So I just put up a few slides. A lot of you are familiar with youth mental health first aid. It has been kind of revised for the current times that we're in and can be offered virtually. So we're really excited about that opportunity. We just want to look at addressing the culture of youth and mental health in the schools. So what are those conversations that are going on around mental health? How can we increase the mental health literacy in the school? How can we reduce stigma so that young people are able to access care? How do we talk to different adults and school personnel to allow them to engage young people in some of these conversations, or to notice when something looks different to connect folks to help? And so that's basically what mental health first aid is. It's not clinical. Anybody can do it, from your principal, your superintendent, the lunch lady, teachers, coaches. So what we are offering in this pilot, and I put some data up here just so that people get a sense of what we're looking at in terms of the data in the country right now. And we're looking to teach how individuals can identify, understand, and respond to signs of mental health challenges and some substance use disorders in youth, because teachers and school personnel are folks that see our young people all the time and every day. So as part of our proposal, and if you wanted to throw that next slide up, that would be great. We're looking at in each school to train 2 instructors. And that is super exciting because we can embed the program then into the school. So you don't need to subcontract with outsiders. You'll have it as your culture of health in the school. And those instructors can engage teachers, coaches, bus drivers, and community members and parents by teaching the simple steps that folks can use in trying to help a young person who might be experiencing mental health challenges or a crisis. We've got some new and expanded content on trauma, but we see it more as augmenting the amazing work that the other folks in this project are going to be doing. I just really loved everything that Caitlin said, because it goes back to some of the evidence around youth mental health first aid and building those relationships. If you could go to the last slide, please. The evidence here is that youth mental health first aid, the research around it just shows that it increases the mental health literacy in the school. And increase the knowledges of resources, both in the school and in the community. And it increases the confidence of lay people to take some action. to ask some questions, to engage a young person who might be experiencing some difficulties. And then again, going back to the culture of health in the school, we find that folks that take the courses, the teachers and the adults that take the courses, tend to feel better also. When they leave, they feel they're not alone, that there's something that they can do to help, that these issues are common. And we know young adults who might be staff are also maybe experiencing some of the signs of mental health issues. So we're very, very pleased to get this going. And we're hoping that once the schools are identified, we can find those leaders who want to become instructors and offer it to their school and their community. So thank you so much, Mary.
Thanks, Ruth. Rob. So another person on our development team is Rosie Grant, who's the executive director of the Patterson Education Fund. And she keeps reminding us about the importance of community. Everybody else reminds us, but Rosie is our advocate. And we're really happy that she's a member of the very wonderful and eclectic development team I mentioned previously. So Rosie's going to talk to us about why there should be community and organizational involvement in this work. So Rosie, tell us what you think.
Thank you, Mary. Good afternoon, everyone. I repeated this picture here because it tells a story of nurturing and community. In developing this initiative, we were very aware that students have lives outside of schools, and even for several years before they even get to us in schools. And drawing from all the ACEs research, we know that traumatic incidences are happening outside of school time, which means we cannot create successful healing-centered environments for our children if parents, caregivers, and communities are not also engaged. The work is school-focused, but schools do not exist in a bubble. Next slide, please. This is another slide you've seen before. No one cog can move without all the others turning. As Mary and others said earlier, collaboration is a key element of healing-centered environment. It is our expectation that schools already have partnerships with communities, working across systems, embracing teamwork, and sharing the responsibility for our students' wellness. This will create a shared framework and common language that is embedded in the community culture, so that the healing-centered environment strategy is embraced by anyone working with children and their families in schools or out of schools. Next slide, please. The picture on the left is Patterson's mayor reading to preschoolers. The one on the right is a science night where children demonstrate their work to parents and community members. 90% of parents turned out for this activity, and they do that consistently time after time. The children are safe, they're happy, and they're engaged. Imagine for a moment a school that is moving toward being a healing-centered environment with an after-school provider, whether in school or outside of school, constantly yelling at the kids or always having punitive measures of discipline, or staff or volunteers telling kids they will never amount to anything. This is the reality for many of our kids. Next slide, please. This is our Patterson Rotary Club hosting a party and coat giveaway in a school. As Caitlin said, when you walk into these schools, you can feel the positive culture. It's because of this interconnectedness that we're asking schools to bring 2 community partners to the table. We want schools to leverage the talent, creativity, and care that exists in their communities while learning from them and sharing ideas with experts and with practitioners. These partners can be program providers or community-based or faith-based organization. They can be health providers, advocacy groups like Patterson Education Fund, professional associations, your frats and your sororities, your faith-based organizations. The application will come from the schools and the initiative is school-focused. However, we want the impact to extend to the entire community. Thank you, Mary, back to you. And thanks again for leading this effort.
Thanks very much, Rosie. Appreciate it. Rob? So what will the application entail? First of all, the training for this will be all done virtually. It's not our preference. For those of you who know, in JPSA and FEA, we have a conference center. We love to gather a couple hundred people together, have good lunch and breakfast, crumb buns, etc. And we can't do it now, though. There is absolutely no way that we would be able to provide this training to our 25 pilot schools by coming together to us. So we're doing it virtually. And we are also planning on doing this training between early March and June. It's something that we want to accomplish during the school year. I mentioned the 6 hours before. It could be 2 hours, 2 hours, and 2 hours. It could be 4 hours and 2 hours. Someone earlier today mentioned they have a 6-hour block of time. Ideally, we'd like to do the training components of the 4 hours, have a little bit of time for thinking and reflecting, come together again, and then move forward with some type of plan of action. And the coaching I mentioned also may be virtual, but if you are in session on a regular basis and you would prefer that the coach join you in your school setting, that's perfectly fine too. As we've said a few times already, we're tailoring this work toward your particular school community and your needs. So this afternoon, you will receive from us a letter which will include the application components. We have a contact sheet, which is actually the application, which will be completed by the school principal. It lists, school, district, et cetera. But we also want the principal to identify these 2 trusted messengers by name. We want the principal to also say who the liaison team will be, PERT, INRS, school climate, et cetera. That's certainly up to you. And we're also asking the principal to identify the information about the 2 community groups. Rosie mentioned many community groups. You know, we've talked about the PTA, PTO, after school programs that may be run by the local YM, YWCA, Boys and Girls Clubs. As I said, it could be the Special Ed Advisory Committee or the Bilingual Advisory Committee. It's really your choice. How will we get the community to become involved in this process in your school? And once again, it should be a relationship that is established, not something that's created for the purpose of this pilot. We have a SurveyMonkey questionnaire, which will be completed by the principal, as well as by the 2 community leads, done separately. And then we have a statement of commitment. All of these activities that we've laid out will be included in the statement of commitment, because we really, really, really want the 25 pilot schools to embrace this concept. And we want it signed by the superintendent, by the principal, as well as the president of the teachers organization. And finally, we would like you to participate in feedback and evaluation. The evaluation is conducting the external evaluation of this project. And as a matter of fact, you'll be receiving a feedback form as soon as we're finished today. And they're actively engaged in designing a process evaluation for this work. This morning, we were asked why only 25? Well, as you can see, this is a new idea. The individual components aren't new, but putting it all together is new to New Jersey. I don't believe that there are any schools in our state who can raise their hand and say, we're doing all of this work that you're providing. So we're trying this out. We want this to be successful, and we're hoping that we will be able to engage more schools in the future in not the pilot, but that this will be standard operating procedure. So I encourage you now to list your questions in the chat. I'll be happy to respond to them. And I will also ask members of our panel to jump in when appropriate. So just type away and let us know what you're thinking. It doesn't have to be a question. It can be a comment. It can be a thought, reflection. No, unfortunately, you cannot apply as a district. It has to be a school. We would love to be able to say we have funding for 25 school districts, but that's not the case right now. So as pointed out before, we're hoping that you're with our trusted messengers who will be trained more intensively than the regular staff, that they will become capacity building folks for a district, so that this work will move on from school to school within your district. But right now we're talking about one school. Yes, the PowerPoint will be shared. We will also turn the recording into a YouTube video, which will be shared probably within the next day or two. It doesn't matter if you have a PTA or not. That isn't the critical piece of the organizational component. It can be any organization with whom you work on a variety of issues. Can central office staff be trained in order to support schools? If I would say central office people want to become part of a school that is trained, that's fine. But we're not specifically taking on a central office as quote unquote a school. We want this to be school based, but the school can include anybody it wishes to. Once again, we're talking about faculty and staff, anyone who touches kids within a building. So the custodian, the food service workers, secretaries, paras, etc. Everybody will be trained. Is this open to public special services schools? Of course, absolutely. And as a matter of fact, earlier today, we had a vocational school, a county vocational school that was interested as well. We're talking pre-K through 12. We do not have it designed by grade level, but as I said, depending upon the nature of your community, we will modify the training and the coaching to satisfy your needs. Right now, is there any consideration being made for continual support beyond the pilot? One of the things we're very strong about is sustainability. And we work closely with the Department of Education on this as well. And one of the assistant commissioners has determined that title funding, as well as some IDA funding, can be used to move this initiative forward in schools. So one would hope that you will look internally at your budgeting and consider ways that this could occur. Ideally, we may get more funding from those who have funded us and others. But right now, we don't have that commitment for more than just the school year. And does it matter what level? Absolutely not. Can the community lead organization be from a different school than the pilot, a different city than the pilot school? Well, I would say if you are working collaboratively with that school, and perhaps your mental health organization that's located in a surrounding town, that's perfectly fine. Could training be done through a local association? The training is definitely done with the school. And it's going to be done, the ACE interface training is going to be done by trainers, as Amanda said, who are NJEA members, and they've gone through the intensive training. So perhaps it will be that some of these members are active in the local association, but the association itself won't be doing the training.
Mary, can I just respond quickly to that?
Absolutely.
And I know Dawn, so hello, Dawn. I'm so happy you're here. ACE's training specifically or alone are offered through NJEA, through our NJEA learning website. So you can do it. We are currently doing it at that state level for all of our members to join. So if you have members interested, it's only available for NJEA members. And so what I would love, thanks, Cami. And so what I would love to differentiate is that this is a comprehensive healing-centered pilot that will incorporate more than just what we're offering in our NJEA ACEs training, which is more for awareness, where this healing-centered pilot is much more for an in-depth, school-wide, community deep plan. Thanks, Mary.
Thank you, Amanda. And we welcome schools who have already received the initial training through Amanda's program as well. We really like the idea that we'll have 25 schools who are ready for this training and are inclined to want to learn more. So by all means, consider applying. Do the trusted messengers need a particular background? Not at all. We want them to be your ambassadors, and whomever you feel would be the best cheerleaders, consider them. It doesn't matter what their background is. The length of the pilot is from now until the end of June. We may move into the summer a bit with some of the coaching, but for now we're talking about accomplishing this by the end of the school year. You'll receive, as I said, a letter with the application this afternoon, and it's due in 2 weeks. We have a quick turnaround time, and we wish to make selections shortly thereafter. So I would hope that we will begin planning for the training in the 25 pilots in the early part of March. Let's see, is the application being sent to all New Jersey schools? It's only being sent to folks who have registered for these 2 sessions. As I said, we had one earlier this morning and this afternoon. And even if the people weren't able to attend this particular session, if they've registered for it, they'll receive the application. Can it be a district-wide? It's one specific school within a district. This morning, I suggested that perhaps for our large urban areas, if there were perhaps 2 or 3 from one community, so that a team could be organized to spread the word, ultimately across the cities, that's fine. But for other than the cities, we would expect it to be one school per district. Let's see, thank you and thank you. And how does a district apply? Well, a school applies and you'll receive a letter now that you're here, Liz, and you just fill out that application. It is not a lengthy application. It should be able to be completed relatively easily. And one of the other questions we had earlier today was, how are we going to make our selections? And our goal is that the 25 schools reflect New Jersey. So we're looking at North Central South, we're looking at pre-K through 12, once again, including vocational schools, charter schools, special service districts. We want variety. If it's an early childhood center and the center works with private providers, we welcome the private providers to join that school as well. We're looking at small, medium, and large. We're looking at former Abbotts and non-former Abbotts. So we really want an eclectic group of pilots so that we can use this model with them and be able to say, yes, we can replicate this in a place that looks like yours. Yes, large school districts may have more than one school apply. Can nonprofits that have a DCF school-based youth service program apply? I work for a nonprofit. Well, from what I gather, the school-based youth services programs are occurring inside a school with the collaborative efforts of I guess in your case, a nonprofit. Nonprofit would be the organization that we're talking about. And it'd be great if we could have some youth services programs apply. Can an organization send an application to the schools? Certainly an organization can say to the principal, I'm very interested in this, are you? And share the application with the principal, share this recording with the principal, the PowerPoint, and ask the principal to reach out if he or she has questions. And by all means, a preschool, any preschool expansion program would be welcome to participate in this project. So did I cover everyone? One more. Okay, thank you. Yes, a lot of thank yous, appreciate it. We're really psyched about this, and I hope you were too. And we're hoping to develop a community of practice within these schools and to spread the journey. I keep using that term, but it makes sense, with others. So we'll be publicizing the work that we're doing, and for everyone to learn about it. And I'm really very excited that so many of you chose to be with us this afternoon. And I agree, bravo and brava for all of our presenters. You received a taste today with Amanda and Caitlin and Sanaz and Rosie as to the quality of our development team. So I can assure you that this model that's been designed is one that has many, many, many thoughts from our group. It's research-based. We've read and read and read, and we've been back and forth for hundreds of hours since April on the ideas that have been presented and the way this project has evolved. So thank you all. Team, anybody want to say anything?
One last thing I'd like to say, I just want to thank you for the leadership you provided along this very long journey, and the teams and the collaboration that you've brought together for this work. Without your leadership, we would not be at this place. So many thanks to you, Mary.
Thanks very much, Donna. It's truly a pleasure to work with this wonderful group. And anybody else have any thoughts, comments? Okay, thank you. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.